What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Plate Stack Chat. Plate Stack Chat live, in fact, number 70. And I am delighted, as always, not to be alone. It's the reason I podcast, right?
Oh, we finally found out why Tom had a baby.
I don't want to be alone.
That's why I podcast. No, but I am joined, as always, as they've already chimed in and started ripping it from me, Jason and Sam. But delighted, as always, to welcome anyone and everyone to the Plate Stack Chat, but specifically this week, welcoming Tyler Watkins, or is it Jason T. Watkins? But either way, you can find him at TexS, which is TEXXESS. But welcome, Jason, Tyler. Welcome to the Plate Stack.
It's Tyler. But yeah, I guess if you don't know me, it's Jason. But you guys can call me Tyler.
Yeah, if we don't know you, or if you
or
comment,
if your name's Jason.
or if you comment on YouTube and it comes up Jason.
It's like my own troll account. Like, I can present myself as that, but I also come off as a troll because people don't know who I am.
I'll tell you what, if Jason comments while you're on the podcast, then we know that something really weird has happened.
Yep.
Oh.
But there we go.
Nice to use it real quick.
Yeah, and Tom, there was a very brief pause just between the music stopping and you started speaking, and I suddenly was worried that I was supposed to start the show.
I love it when that happens. Absolutely love it.
I thought it was like, like the professionals do that silent countdown before kind of like starting.
Oh.
But I guess that's when you're not going live, isn't it?
Sorry.
You know that's only only Ron Burgundy does that, right?
Oh no, I was thinking the Wayne's World countdown.
Yeah.
You got to put the hips into it.
Right.
But Tyler, it's wonderful to have you joining us. It's just about now. The sun's going down here, 8 p.m. But I've enjoyed working out what the time difference is, and you are 2 p.m. Central, which puts you in Alabama, right?
Alabama, currently. Not from Alabama. Not going to claim that.
Are you in Greenbow?
Yes.
Are you actually?
No. I don't think Greenbow's real. I think it's
No,
fake.
I don't think it is either.
But the answer, if you're in Alabama, is I'm from Greenbow. Don't even say
Greenbow,
anywhere.
Alabama. Yep.
Nice.
If you don't get that reference, go watch Forrest Gump and come back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people might know who you are, might recognize you, might recognize your name one way or another. But you've definitely someone that I've really enjoyed following content for, especially recently because you've started to kind of use stats to highlight kind of stories within the within competitive CrossFit, which I am a massive advocate for. Anyone that follows me on Chalking Fitness will know that for sure. And so I was delighted to kind of welcome you on board to kind of like talk more about it. Sam and Jason,
Where
I'm
can
not
we follow
sure.
you, Tom? Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't get that.
Don't worry about it.
Chalking Fitness.
I can't help but just be a constantly plugging. It just comes naturally. So, But before we kind of get into stats a bit, like Tyler, like what's like? Okay, you're in Alabama. Like, are you as avid about like CrossFit, like getting in the gym yourself as stats? Is that where it comes from?
Yeah. So when I first started doing all this, like I'm competitive, but I have to really push my body to do anything that's even remotely impressive. And so maybe 10 years ago, when I first started trying to compete, I was at CrossFit Maximus, and we had several, like every year we had a team that went to the games, and we had Jen Smith, if you all remember her. And so I desperately wanted to be on that team, and I wanted to figure out what's the difference between me and them. And I started like trying to measure things and finding out like, okay, what does it take to be on a team and all this, and where am I at? And that's where it sort of started. That, and I was studying accounting at the time. Spreadsheets are kind of our deal. So I just started putting this stuff together. And then I realized eventually, like, I've done a lot of work and this is useful to some people.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've occasionally, like, because I always say I'm not competitive, right? But I think I am because I keep going even though I'm never anywhere near the top. So there's some sort of drive in there, and I've definitely enjoyed kind of trying to understand it. I like looking at the fact that I normally rest for more time than it takes some of the kind of like top athletes to kind of complete the workout. So that's normally where it is with any workouts.
Anybody can keep going. You know, it takes skill to know when to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of resting, Sam, how's your week been? Have you been back in the gym this week? Been busy?
Yeah. What did I do? Yeah. To be fair, I did Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Thursday. Almost every day apart from Sunday, actually. Yeah, mate.
I thought
Yesterday
this was
on
a Craig David song for a minute.
Yeah, well, 7 days. Check it out. No, I don't think I've worked out so much in my life actually, as I have in the last month or so. I'm really happy with how my training's going. Although it seems that we're in a hypertrophy phase. That means something apparently. But basically, it just feels like they're ripping my muscle fibers every day, and for a different part of my body each day. Yesterday was my posterior chain. We were doing. We had to echo bike for a mile. Echo bike just doesn't. They just don't seem to go anywhere. You're like, it's not like a leisurely. As long as you sort of sit at about 65 cadence, you actually move. Anything lower than that, and you feel like you're not going anywhere. But anything higher than that, you feel like your lungs are going to escape out of your mouth. But yeah, we had to do a mile of that, then rest for 30 seconds, then do 8 deadlifts at 65 to 70%, which for someone, I didn't know what my 1RM was. So one of the guys was like, oh, it must be like 200. So I was like, okay, I'll go off of 70% of 200 then, which is like 140. Yeah, 8 deadlifts at 140 wasn't fun. And then you rest for 60 seconds, do that 4 times. You have to do that in 5.5 minutes. It was absolutely disgusting. Thank you, Sam Park from Bear Walden, for programming that. I was getting DOMs an hour after. That's how bad it was. It was just There was no DOM. It was just Yeah. But yeah, training, I love it. I'm really enjoying wrecking myself at the moment. In a good way. Not putting myself in hospital, hopefully.
What about you, British Jason?
Oh. I don't know if I like that.
You've been absolutely. Look, we talked about this recently, right? Of like, that you've really enjoying training. Is that still going well for you?
Yeah, love training. I've had a big gap just because I couldn't go in on the Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday they were just doing like the morning workouts that are tough for me to get on with the family anyway. And then I think also Monday was a like bank holiday timetable, so I couldn't get in. So I went back in today, and yeah, it was all right. It was good to be back. I've been enjoying it. Actually, Thursday. So this was like when we had Matt on, and I was talking about like going in knowing I have to PB, and I was like, I'm going into PB my snatch today, and he's like, the thought that you go in saying I'm going into PB, that kind of idea. And I think on Wednesday we'd had weighted chin-ups, and it was like max. Yeah, you have to do 3 weighted chin-ups, like build to your max 3 weighted chin-ups. So I think I hit 20 kilos 3 times, and I managed to get 2 reps at 24. And then the next day, it was like trying to get strict ring muscle ups. And there was something about like, well, look, yesterday I was able to pull myself up to the bar with 24 kilos attached. There, like you are stats guys. Come on, surely the stats should tell me that there's nothing preventing me from doing this now. And I had like a little bit of help to get the first one. And then as soon as I got it, it just clicked. And then I was just, every time I jumped up, knocking one out. Obviously, I've had a big break, went back into the gym today. And after doing the workout, I was like, well, if I don't try and do one now, like I might forget how to do them. So there was just one very tired, strict ring muscle up at the end of the day. And I was like, okay, the workout didn't go that great, but at least I haven't lost this in a week. So that's good.
And it's on Instagram, so it's
saved for
real.
Yeah. If you don't film it, it didn't happen.
That's my rule. Is if I do like, so say I PR my clean or PB, sorry, say I PB my clean, I have to do it again or it's not real.
Yeah,
I have to do it twice.
Two to make it true.
Yeah.
2 to make it true. I like that.
Where's that come from? Oh, that's like at some point in lockdown, I fell down a YouTube hole, and there's a West Coast like skateboarding YouTube channel. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, that's gonna really annoy me. Yeah, they always said two to make it true. But whether they coined it or they just took it from somewhere else, I don't know. But there we go.
They probably coined it, mate.
Yep.
You need to watch. Everybody in their life should watch more skate edits because you learn so much about every culture possible. Yeah.
I was pretty
that
close
used
to
be my
buying a
life.
skateboard, put it that way.
Yeah.
But then I realized I'm in like my later 30s and don't bounce anymore. You know.
Hey, don't let the guys from the Crap Skateboarding podcast let you say that.
I was going to say, you were talking about skating. I found my DVD that I won from their podcast. I just found that earlier today. But actually, the other thing, Tom, I better get in there quickly because Friday's my CrossFit anniversary will be on Friday. And the reason I know it's my CrossFit anniversary is because it conveniently coincides with my wedding anniversary. So those two are on the same day, which is very useful. Not the same amount of years, I'll be honest.
My dad getting married on his birthday. Like it's like in the same sort of thing as it. You can't forget because it's on your birthday. You know?
I think it's more to do with the fact that the trouble we have to find a babysitter, we literally need it to be like, hey, it's our anniversary. Could somebody babysit? And then it was like, well, what are we going to do? Let's go and give this CrossFit thing a try. So that's sort of how that happened. But Rochelle is still absolutely smashing her training as well. So like today we had which is like, what is it, free sumo deadlifts. After having done a big snatch complex before that, it was free sumo deadlifts. And so she did the class before me. I went in and she was like, oh, hit 95 for the free deadlifts. I'm like, what? Pretty good. I hit 150, so, you know, I still won, but...
Just one-upping your wife every week.
But what was
don't know
really
if you
nice,
know, sweetheart, but I'm kind of a big deal.
what was nice is that there was two ladies behind me, Kate, who has been on the CrossFit Buff podcast a number of times, and she was like very determined to hit a certain number, and she kept saying about it, and then I just turned around and I was like, yeah, Rochelle hit 95. Sorry about that.
Good time.
Just friendly bit of competition. Just a friendly bit of competition. That's what the stats tell you, that it's just friendly competition.
You can't just say that's what the stats. Just throw that in.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start doing that. I must loving digging into the leaderboard all the time, whether it be to see who's near the top or to work out what dominance is or not. You know, from different athletes, how are they performing? Have they got a standout performance? Are they pretty consistent? The issue that arises then, though, is I spend a lot more time looking at spreadsheets, and not to do with like any sort of paid job than perhaps training. So, Tyler, how are you finding it at the moment? It's a busy time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, this is sort of new for me. I've always done it, but it's not been on other people's timelines, you know, with writing, and now I'm actually trying to produce content within the timelines of the sport instead of just doing this for fun. It's added quite a bit to my plate. But it's been fun trying to learn how to keep up with it.
So I'll tell you something. I wrote a couple of articles last year for like looking at teams and stuff and individuals at some point, and then like I was like, oh no, I really want to follow up because I posed a question around whether teams in Europe were inherently stronger because of having quite a competitive individual field, so then people kind of go team or whatever. Anyway, that was my hypothesis, and I went off and, like I say, trying to do it on the appropriate timeline, but I kind of put together a draft I wasn't really happy with, but it was about February of this year, and I kind of like, I was like yeah, the kind of book's closed on 2021 now, right. So but it gave me some ideas for this year. But yeah, it's I'm having to, as much as I enjoy it, I'm having to kind of like create like an idea of like, well, what's the story I'm interested in, and try and use the stats to then create the stats that help to kind of unpick that story, or to where that story is going to come from, as it were, rather than just being like, oh, I'll just, because it can be really dangerous, just like, let's just do this stat and this stat and this stat. But you've recently kind of had your Barbend article, which then you've worked with Brian to kind of like further contextualize it for kind of CrossFit. You'd contextualized it for CrossFit already, but were you doing it for baseball already? Like, are you a massive fan of baseball as well?
No. So I wanted this to be easy. You know, Sam's like, him and I were talking before the show started, and he's like, stats are boring. Yeah, they kind of are, but they can be used to tell a story. And you know, you can easily grab these and say, okay, what stories does this tell? And those aren't available right now. And so I wanted to make them. And so I just started looking around in different sports, and the batting averages and the batting numbers for baseball really just seemed applicable in this situation. I planned on going further, but right now I'm doing the book tour for the baseball stats. So
Now,
Well,
what's interesting is that you said, as Sam said, stats are boring. So I knew that Sam thought stats were boring, and I know that Tom thinks stats are very interesting. What I didn't know is how dangerous they were, apparently. So that was news to me, Tom. When
How
you dropped
so?
that bomb a second, I don't know. That's Tom just said it can be really dangerous when you start going down one stat and then doing another stat. And I'm sat here going,
You just end
who
up,
knew?
I just followed this stat and I ended up out of this plane. Like, oh my goodness.
So I think what I mean is that there's so many different ways that you can like cut it. So I went more dangerous in that it gets to like 2 a.m. and you're like, I don't know which way's up anymore, because there's so many different ways you can slice and dice it. And I think that's what's really cool, to kind of take something from like another sport which has had that, because like CrossFit's so kind of young, relatively speaking, that like it hasn't had that chance to kind of build up the almanac of statistics. So great idea to kind of go and look for it somewhere else, and kind of then and also then it kind of comes with a little bit of explanation, because like I've done a few bits in the past, and it's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed what you've done, is that I was coming at it more just from the kind of like the math side, and being kind of like, how the hell do I explain like standard deviation here? And it's like, just don't, it's just no, like, so I love the context of baseball and bringing it across, because I think, like you say, stats are boring, and I mean, thankfully Sam and Jason haven't logged off yet. But it's how it can identify stories, and like you started with, was it kind of performance average, or
leader
is it,
average? Yeah,
leader average, right? Which I previously talked about how many athletes were able to finish in the top 10 of every workout. But you just nicely turned it into a percentage. So people are like, 100%, they're always in the top 10, or whatever you define as your kind of like cutoff, whether it be top 10 or top 5, top 20. It's a really nice way of doing it. And then digging into that further to understand, okay, if they're in the top 10, are they actually in the kind of top third more than that? So it's cool.
Right.
So stats inherently by themselves are boring. If you gave someone the book of stats and was like, hey, check this out, they're like, yeah, cheers. Probably just like use that as a paperweight, or use my paper as a paperweight. But like, if you're using them, as you say, if you're using them to answer a question, so like CrossFit, your average person might be like, what is this CrossFit thing all about? And you're like, oh, well, it's functional movements performed at high intensity. Well, yeah, but what does that mean? Like,
oh yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But then you can say, well, okay, well, and it has to be measurable, and stats are useful for measuring stuff, right? My statistics used to be this. I then did the phases of training that I'm doing, and then I tested again, and they were better. And then over a period of time, I have more knowledge of, it's essentially knowledge. If yes, I'll openly say I think stats are boring. That's not actually true, but it kind of is. But it does answer some of the questions that I pose, right? So if I said, it's the difference between, it's the 80-20 rule, isn't it? Right? You have to put 20%.
Oh, that sounds a bit like a stat to me, right there.
Exactly. But you put in 20% effort and you get 80% output, right? And it's only when you start putting in all the effort until you see incremental change in that, right? And that, yes, that is a stat in itself. But the idea of, as an MC, I am probably going to be asking the guys who I know that do stats about their statistics while I'm on the competition floor, comparing athletes against each other, because it's interesting things to say, rather than you're just going, yeah, look at them, aren't they doing really well? Yeah, they're going so fast. Actually like, oh yes, and I'll know that, for example, if I've looked at some stats, that if Zach George is in the same heat as Reggie Fasser at Sid, then that that I'll know something about their journey because I've looked at their statistics and where they came in the open, and historically, and that kind of stuff. So it answers questions that people have, because you're not just pulling it out of nowhere.
Right. So I think getting back to stats are dangerous. I mean, they are in a way. I don't know if you guys
But dangerous for your marriage, we've understood.
Right.
is basically.
I don't know if you guys caught, like, I first came on the scene with the Z-score paper, which was the Rogue Invitational. I rescored it using a sliding system. And people got all kinds of pissed off. Everybody, you had people. I mean, Brent Fikowski made 2 retaliation videos, essentially breaking down every scoring system you could use. And then, like, I made enemies of people I didn't know, and they didn't know me. And that was the same thing. He was talking to people all of a sudden have opinions about math that I don't know anything about math. But the hardest and most dangerous thing with what I'm dealing, or what I've come across with stats so far, is exactly what you said. So you don't know what these numbers mean right now, but they do tell a story. I think Tia's percentage right now, leader average. So her percentage of coming in top 5, her chance of coming in top 5 is like 80%. And you're going into a final event and you're like, let's say Tia's like in 3rd and she needs to really pull one out. Well, she's got she's got an 80% chance of being in the top 5 on this workout, blah, 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 blah. And so what we have to do is get it into the zeitgeist, so to speak. And so that's what I've been working to do, is get some of these, cure some of that, apprehension people have of using some of these statistics.
Yeah. And I think there's always that, it has to come with a caveat, right? Is that it is just a way of looking at the data. And I've found it like the more like, the community is inherently easy to offend, right? And that, like, just because you create a statistic and kind of present something, which if nothing else creates a talking point, people like are immediately offended. Like, you've told them that kind of like the earth is flat when they think it's round or something like that, and you're like, this is just stats. Like, it's just a way of analyzing data and creates a talking point, right? So, and I think people, I'd forgotten about, or I hadn't forgotten about the Z score, but I'd not realized there was such a retaliation afterwards, being like, no, you shouldn't do that. And people just need to be like, but it doesn't change reality. It's just
it's hypothetical.
It adds color, right? It adds color to the sport, which we're yet really to introduce. Like, in other sports, no one would kind of like get really uppity if you were like, well, if you scored NFL in a different way, then someone else would win. I'm like, yeah, and if an orange didn't have a peel, it would be something else.
Okay, I've got a couple of thoughts. I'm going to throw them out there now. I wonder, on the one side, is it because we're so attached to the unknown and unknowable, right? So it's like the competition is unknown and unknowable. And if you turn around and go, well, actually, I know this person has an 80% chance of finishing in the top 5 here, that sort of somehow eliminates the unknowable side of it. But to be honest, we all know, like, if you tell me, oh, Tia's got an 80% chance of finishing in the top 5,
seems about right.
I'd be like, yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't really. And you did that with math. I did that with my eyeballs, just looking. So that was sort of. But the other thing I think is interesting in what you're saying is actually that is information that, like, so last week we talked about team. And there was this discussion of like, is the story around team boring? And I said, well, no, I think it's really exciting. I think the people don't know how to use team drama in CrossFit because they haven't done it. And I think it's the same with the stats. So if, like, on the one hand, if it's guaranteed that Tia's going to come in the top 5, she's got an 8% chance. Okay, who cares? But if it's sort of this person's doing really well, this could be an upset. Statistically, like, this is how difficult it's going to be for them to kind of complete what they're doing here. And like, they do that. That's incredible, right? I mean, actually, when we were speaking with Chase, we went back to like Noah Olsen going out too hot. And like, are you being critical? No, we're not being critical. It's giving context to everybody watching it. They're like, yeah, Noah's in the lead, but he historically goes out too hot. Can he hold off Matt Fraser? And when he did, that was exciting for everybody who knew who Noah is, and for people who didn't, because they were told, by the way, this guy usually goes out too hot and he can't hold it for the whole workout, and he did. And I think it'd be the same thing. Somebody like pulling off, a win over Tia on an event that was statistically
way out of the range.
Yeah, that's exciting if you give someone that context. But maybe the people doing it don't know how to,
let
gently
me tell one of
assert
those
this.
stories. So I just got off I got off the phone with Brian, friend, and we were talking about this. And everybody, so the syndicate is the one that I'm going to, and it's the most stacked competition, period, of everyone. And Justin, the story is Justin and Jason. That's the story that everybody wants to talk about. And I'm here to tell you, Jason doesn't stand a chance. I think he's great, but he's not going to beat Medeiros, period. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the real story about halfway through the weekend is going to be, and this is speculation on my part, but I think it's going to come out this way. Taylor Self and Jason are going to have a battle. And I think Taylor has a chance of beating Jason. But it's going to be an absolute show. And on Sunday, everybody's going to realize this. And no one's talking about it yet. But I'm seeing this coming around, and I'm thinking about prepping an interview with Jason and Taylor and getting this stuff ready. No one else is seeing this. They're only talking about Justin, Scott, and Jason. Or Will Morad. Will Morad, in my rankings right now, is in 7th. But he's a perennial games athlete. But he might not make it. Just off preliminary data, he's not going to make it. But that man has a will like no one else I've ever seen to just turn it on and say, I'm going to win this. With a wrecked body and everything.
And I think that's one of the things is that we're still at that stage where, and I was talking about this the other day actually around stats can show you stories, and I think Brian said that as well, right? Is he and when we've had him on Plate Stack Chat actually, he's talked about how he uses it to make sure that to justify highlighting kind of athletes or perhaps battles that the media isn't otherwise kind of highlighting. And I think often it's because visual media, and by visual I mean kind of more what we get on Instagram typically of photos and videos and snippets, right? They're trying to weave an existing narrative, which is why then it's kind of the focus on kind of Scott still being in there despite having retired, and kind of Jason and Justin, and there's a little bit kind of it's already in people's mind's eye, so people build upon that because people are they're going to resonate with that. They're going to be like, oh, that was already in my head, and we all look for that kind of self-validation, right? So we whether we like to agree or not, we kind of if we see something about something like yellow car syndrome, I think, right, we're kind of almost looking for the stuff that aligns with what we're already thinking about. And I think that, so it's really interesting that when you look at it on the stats side, actually there's other people that might be on the bubble who you're only going to see that after the fact, right? You're only going to see that in the final day of the semifinals when you're like, whoa, that perennial games athlete is on the outside of the bubble, or that person that we kind of ruled out because they were down in 30th place or wherever in the quarterfinals, they kind of didn't really think they'd make it, but something about the performance, which only comes from looking at it more objectively with stats, brings something out.
One of the interesting things. Sorry, Jason. I'll put this in, and then you can jump in.
Right, you go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. One of the things, one of the stories that happened like that for me, I was in Miami at Wadapalooza, and I think Ariel Lowen, she's someone I've been keeping my eye on because she did break the statistics last year. She came out of nowhere, and I had nothing on her, and I was like, "What the hell's happening?"
She was in my dream team, my fantasy league. I'm just saying. I knew she was coming. I knew it. I had no statistics on that. I just knew it. You can
he knew it with his
statisticize. You can you can statisticize all you want, but if you know, you know.
Yeah, and so I was watching her closer in Miami because after I saw what she did, I was like, I have to watch her. She's breaking all my statistics. I have no idea what she's capable of. So I was rescoring. I was Z-scoring Wadapalooza as it was happening. And if you followed me on Instagram at the time, you will have noticed she was in 10th after the first day, 10th or 7th or something like that. And I said, all my indicators are pointing that she's going to be in 4th or 3rd by the end of tomorrow. And she was. And so I knew that before, and no one was talking about her. And I was like, she's going to be here. And I had messaged her that, and she was like, you called it, and I don't know how you did.
I was doing the hard work, and I didn't even know.
You're like the CrossFit Jedi.
Yeah. Exactly.
They're not the athletes you're looking for.
Oh, you see, I've been sitting here this whole time, Sam, thinking how anti-Jedi this all is. How it's all based on numbers and stats, and there's no feeling. And I was
Yeah.
like, like the numbers, and I was having Han Solo flashbacks to never tell me the odds.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like
true that.
going in, you're going against Tia. She's got an 80% chance of winning.
But-
Never tell me the odds.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking before was that, like, I think stats. So there are stats that are undeniable, because, like, especially when you're doing kind of after the fact. Just, this is like a lot of the stuff Tom puts out on Chalking Fitness. Why not? Let's give it a nice plug. We'll be
thanks.
we'll
So
be quite
where
often.
Chalking Fitness?
Have you
Yeah.
heard about Chalking Fitness?
I've heard a little. So I got a patch somewhere.
Mine's in my bag.
But it will, that will look at, like, okay, this was these events that happened, and this is how many people in this category or in that category or where they ranked, and that's just taking the factual information and then kind of putting it into a easily understood format. So, like, oh, here's a nice pie chart that explains that this many people were from here and this many people from there, and visually I can kind of get all of that.
I love a pie chart, by the way.
These nice little 3D ones he does on
Mate, I
PlayStation,
love
really
it.
nice.
Anything that involves pie.
Yeah, there you go. But what I do find at the same time is that, especially within CrossFit, stats can be not wrong. Like, the stats can be correct, but they don't matter at certain times. So I think back to regionals where you had this thing of people constantly comparing, like, oh, well, the top 5 here compared to the bottom 10 in this place, and look at the times, and you're like, yeah, look at the elevation of where that was held, look at the the heat, or like external factors. Like, just looking at numbers on a chart isn't giving you the whole story,
Right.
and then I think with like particularly the young, like, up and coming CrossFitters, like, the amount of progress they can make in a year is just, it's like incredible, right? We're not used to seeing that. So you could go into the open being like, well, so and so will do well, or this one, or like, an off-season competition being like, well, we've seen this person compete in the open, and this is where they ranked, and and like in 6 months they have just become a monster. So I think the stats are good, but I think there's also that inherent danger that people become too kind of by the numbers and are like, well, actually, and it maybe ignore some of the interesting stories, because sometimes, like, something going on in somebody's personal life could have a bigger impact on their performance than any stats would tell you, kind of thing.
Like becoming a mum, for example.
Yeah, suddenly you do better at the games. Who knew that was the solution?
And
then
that's
how many of you had the stats telling us that Annie was going to go team? Huh?
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, this many people go team after having a child. But I think that's one of the things, like, with the kind of like leader average and those rankings, because those stats, you're pulling results from multiple events. Is that right? So the good thing there is like, Jason, you're absolutely right, is that you've got to remember the unknown and the unknowable is like, well, who's in the field? Where are they? Are they in kind of like a crazy elevation or whatever? And the bigger the data bank gets, the more that the kind of the noise is averaged out. And so you can start to kind of like, and it's only an indication, right? And you're never going to see, like, well, you shouldn't ever see, like, yeah, Tia might be like 80% chance of being in the top 5, but that's kind of like 20% chance she's not, right? And yeah, there's going to be error in that, but that's why I really like what you've been doing, Tyler, of kind of like pulling everything from multiple events, because it starts to try and take into account the fact that things can be different here, different there. One of the things I've been doing is I've been using your kind of different stats, but just for the quarterfinal results. And there's an immediate, and so Jason, what you were saying there, but is that really fairly representative? Well, no, not really, because it's a virtual event, right? So it doesn't take into account like the adrenaline of a live event, some of the types of movements that they're not going to do in a virtual event, right? So if there's going to be like a pig flip or a kind of like, I don't know, this, that, or the other. So I think like I've used that because I always find it interesting, because I've always done the whole like, oh, how dominant are certain athletes at a certain stage of the season. So like, how many athletes are finishing in the top 30, but then trying to like weed it out just out of interest. In doing that, just to kind of give an example, if I look at that podium rate, so that's like giving additional weighting to athletes that finish, and with the quarterfinals, I did top 10 rather than top 3, just because you've got over 1,000 athletes. I was like, well, let's take the kind of like the top whatever percent that it would work out at, and you've got finished 54th in the European quarterfinals, so he makes it to semis, but you might not be kind of giving him much thought. But Ioannis Papadopoulos, I think that's his surname. Yeah, he got 2 event wins. One. No, he got 2 event wins. He won event 4 and event 5 in the European quarterfinals, right? So, he's kind of clearly got the ability to perform better than the rest of the field in those 2 events. Now, yeah, he had some low events. Andre Houdet is another one, finished 11th, right? So he's not inside the top 10, but, he's got, a number of kind of like, he's got an event finish, which obviously gives a good weighting, but equally finished, I think, in the top 30 in the quarterfinals for 3 out of the 5 quarterfinal events. So, anyone doing the kind of who to keep an eye on would probably point out Andre Houdet as someone likely to kind of be vying for a game spot. But, I think it's just interesting that you're not necessarily seeing those kind of like those finishing top who actually could be kind of making for the most interest, right? Because you could say like Tia dominating. I wouldn't say it's boring, but it's kind of predictable. And sometimes the unpredictable is what makes it exciting if you're a pure fan of the sport more than, say, a fan of an individual.
But Tia can be in the top 5 80% of the time. But if someone comes and is in the top 5 85% of the time, then they're going to beat Tia, right? That's literally how statistics work.
Right.
So, and if someone else comes in and they're in 82% of the time, then they're probably going to get higher than Tia too. And, I suppose you only have to look at the quarterfinals, because she was literally in the top 5 80% of the time. She finished 7th in one workout, and the rest she finished in the top 4. So that that tells you your stats are good.
Go ahead, Jason.
I want to throw out some other curveballs. I just want to see how you respond.
Well, let me get this in. Let me get this in. Then you do your thing. I did want to say, like, I don't want to take the feel totally out of it, like the spirit of the whole thing.
No,
because you're right. The only 3 documentary that Sevon did years ago, if you guys remember that, Central East Regional, and there was 5 guys who could have went, or that did go to the games the previous year, 2014 regional or 13 regional, and then in the 14 they said no more of that. We're only doing 3 from this region, and like some of the guys just absolutely threw down that didn't have any business being as good as they were because they were trying to sacrifice their soul. What my stats do is kind of give you a leading off point, and then you're like, okay, but whose soul has to be on this one? And who can really outperform themselves? And then you can talk about it. Or who is totally outmatched here? And then look what they did just because they poured their soul into it. Who pulled an Ariel Lowen?
So that needs to be a column on your spreadsheet, right? How much soul, percentage of soul poured in.
Soul percent.
Soul points.
Soul points.
To be fair, I actually no, but you can
that would be cool.
But you can measure that. You can just, and that's where, well, you can't actually measure
Can you?
it. No, but
I think the science.
We've got to go there, like,
but that's where,
no,
but that's where if you look, if you, and that's where I kind of, I'm like almost stats are on a spectrum, right? Or people that do stats are on a spectrum. but if stats is like one end of the spectrum, like I'm almost like the other end of the spectrum, which is like fully looking at who has like the heart, and like stats, as you said, stats tell you like the probability of something, right? But the heart tells you like how much grit this person has. Now they might not have wanted, they might not have wanted it as much. Look at Matt Fraser, right? Matt Fraser didn't win the first 2 times he was at the games, right? 2 times. He didn't win. I mean, he came second, but
Doesn't matter,
arguably
didn't win.
exactly.
You mean
It's
the first of the losers? Yes.
yeah. Matt Fraser, the first loser. Maybe that's the title of his new
And
book.
can I just say, while I've interrupted, I finally understood now then why we keep seeing all the Whoop data. It's so we can measure heart. So we basically understood.
There
that
it is. Got it.
But as you say, like the adversity or whatever it is that you go through. But I tend to look at people's Instagrams and like what they do, and it's not a good measure. But also like look at how they conduct themselves as well. Like that is a good measure. So like,
well, that's what I love about Taylor Self.
Yeah.
Pardon my French, but that motherfucker is pissed. He is mad as hell. And anyone, I saw him at Wadapalooza, and that he was the most. I can approach anyone. I don't care. I can talk to you. I would not go up to him. More so, like Colton's pretty. Like Colton Mertens is pretty unapproachable, but I could still talk to him. I was not going up to Taylor Self.
Yeah.
And
I guess the difference is you could talk at Colton.
Yeah.
You could just talk at him, and he just kind of will just stand there. But
Over.
Yeah.
Taylor might swing at you. That's the
But
difference.
Taylor, like he's gonna take that out on the field with him, and he's had one coming for a long time, and I'd hate to be anybody in his way right now.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Just
Taylor
be careful,
Self train.
be careful which stats you put out on Taylor.
Well,
then.
exactly. But that's it. Like if you have that heart, like there are some. I think I've said it on the podcast before. Like I don't compete much, and I don't really enjoy competing. But if I'm throwing down, I'm throwing down. Like if it was a race on a rower, I'll die on the rower before I let you beat me. Right? I'll die on the bike before I let you beat me. Like your stats might be through the roof. Like you might have you might be better than me at every single thing, but I'm not going to let you win. So if you're going to win, you're going to have to try hard to win because just because my stats are not as good as yours doesn't mean I'm not as good as you. It
doesn't
means
mean I won't pass out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather, and that, I think that's the difference. Like I'd much rather be known as the guy who passed out trying to win than the guy who, than the guy with the average stats. Right. That guy passed out because he wanted to win so much. Whereas,
that guy should have won, but he didn't.
That guy should have won, but but he didn't want it as much. He didn't have it in here. Like we have it on paper, but do you have it in here or up here?
Right.
And I think I think that's what Matt is doing for
Mallory. Yeah.
I think that is what Matt is giving to Mal, and just the guys around him. That HWPO kind of that mentality. I don't actually agree with it because it doesn't always, but if you have that mentality, it will eventually pay off because if you surround yourself with hardworking people, you will become hardworking.
Right.
That's just the way it is.
Jason, what's the curveballs?
So I just wonder, I almost forgot them, but don't worry, I'll pull them back.
I've written them down.
No, actually, I like that. I keep seeing like Tom looking over clearly to a computer screen. Everybody seems to have screens in front of them, and I'm just looking at everybody's face and trying to be like, okay, I'm listening to you, and I'm forming questions as I do. So I wonder, with the nature of CrossFit being still not just like a young sport, but very immature in the way it handles itself as a sport very often, and we may touch on semifinals, for example, as an example of that, how much that can skew data that is then used to make stats, because you're doing the stats based on performances, but there's, I don't know, I think professional athletes that are playing for professional teams in well-established leagues that, have every kind of part of that itinerary taken care of. So we're going to get you to this event. We'll drive you there. If you're not feeling well, we've got people on site. Like there's just, and if someone's really not feeling well, they don't play. So that doesn't affect maybe their stats.
There's not as many variables.
Yeah, whereas in CrossFit, it's like, you're going to compete this weekend. We don't care there is no other opportunity. This is the one weekend you can compete. And, you have to go all the way over here and do it. And so I was like, okay, so yeah, before that event, I traveled like all through the night because I was paying my own way, paying my accommodation. I could, didn't want to, I've got a family at home that I still having, or I'm still working in the gym. So I had to kind of coach that day, close up the gym before traveling up. So there's all of these kind of factors that, because of the nature of how CrossFit just functions at the moment, surely skew performances and you know, athletes aren't coming out and being like, yeah, I could have done better, but you know, I've got problems in life. It's just you've got that small minority that are just full-time CrossFitters and they don't have to do anything else in their life and everything is kind of working for them, and all the rest, like you've still got that big group that are just trying to balance quite chaotic lives with doing CrossFit.
I have 2 anecdotes to this though.
Oh,
So
it was a good question. I knew it was a good question.
There's these things are like legend now, but there's that story that Rich got off a flight late, or during the Only 4 documentary or Only 3 documentary, he was sick. He had the flu and he still won. He still almost got first on almost every single event. So it's like he had no way of controlling that he was sick. But then there's also, like, I call it the Brent Fikowski effect. Brent did he had a full-time job and was like a big up-and-comer on the scene. And then he was like, I'm all in. He did the all-in thing and he quit being an accountant and he just did CrossFit and he had sponsorship money and all that stuff. And then he did worse.
Yeah.
I think there's something too, and this is something you can't measure. This is part of the heart rate or the heart or soul rating.
Soul rating
is I think people carry that on them. And it's like they know that they could use this as an excuse, and then they're like, "Fuck that! I'm not falling down. No one else gets to have these excuses, so I don't get to have them either.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I don't care."
Like that's where very often they've talked about like Sarah is a classic one where people are always like, oh, she should have done better. It's like her problem isn't physical. It's up here. Like that's sort of been the weakness. And these are the factors, right? So you're like, well, like for Brent, oh, you know, I'm working full time and I'm still performing this well. That's great. The pressure on you when you've like publicly told everyone, right, this is it now, all or nothing. Uh-oh, it was nothing. Like that's
I mean,
gotta
it was
mess you up.
fourth.
Yeah, it was
Oh
fourth.
no, that was the year he got. No, wasn't that the year he got cut? And he was fourth last year, right?
Yeah.
But and this is where stats are useful. Did he actually do worse, or obviously the leaderboard says that he did worse, but his numbers can't have been any worse. Like his actual physical, like output numbers can't have been worse in the year that he was able to train more and he was sponsored. So and this is again goes back.
He
to
tested
like,
worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if CrossFit aren't letting you do all of the things in order to get the numbers across,
exactly.
So like, you know, if he'd maybe
that's the sport.
done it himself,
Yeah.
That is the sport. Ooh.
Yeah, well, but we've talked around this point before. Should that be the sport? Like, I know that it's unknowable, unknown, and unknowable, right? But when you're,
I do hate that byline too, because it's just a shitty way out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, things are hard. Well, unknown and unknowable.
Yeah. You should have trained for this. What, train for you cut in half the field
Train
after
for
the
COVID?
first event? Like,
Yeah, you should have trained for COVID. Come on.
well,
I also am
there
just
is an
wondering-
interesting. Bring me back to that later.
Well, yeah, my thought is less interesting. It's just we talked quite a long time ago about like CrossFit top trumps, and I'm just wondering if we're going to add like soul points on, and that can be a real curveball for like an athlete that you've got. That like I've got this one, he's got the heaviest clean, the greatest back squats. We're like soul points. You're like, oh no, soul points are rubbish.
Like you will, but you
Start
will
making baseball
Morads,
cards
your
for
Gabby
athletes, soul
Magalas,
points.
like but your Will Morads, your Gabby Magalas, like your Daniel Brandons, like those guys, like grafters, hearters.
Danielle's got rage points.
I've never obviously met her, but is she another one that you like wouldn't approach? Or
Oh, I love her because she's not willing to play other people's games. It's her game, and she'll set the world on fire for no reason, and I like that about her.
Just to watch it burn, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
She's
like the
loose
Joker.
cannon. Yeah, let's just see what happens. What are y'all gonna do? I'm a double bird, everybody.
That's why she dyed her hair if she's trying to be the Joker.
Right.
It's just like a
Joker that's cosplay. Basically how Rad are selling their shoes, right?
Yeah, just rage.
That's literally, but so the question that I have, so this takes us away from stats. Is that okay?
Go for it.
Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. In fact, it doesn't, but it does.
He's writing stats out.
Yeah. But the Mal O'Brien obviously moving because she was supposed to compete in the Granite? With the one in
Atlas.
Canada.
Yeah.
Atlas.
The one that was in Canada.
Atlas was in Canada. Now she's
that is in Canada, but now she's competing in the US. Is that to do with her vaccination status? Is a question. That's a question.
I believe, and I should do what you do, Sam, of reading it verbatim, but there is a quote or whatever it's called, like a statement from CrossFit, which is about trying to make it as easy as possible for athletes to compete at all stages of the games, and like, taking into account, visa requirements given vaccination status or something like that. So it doesn't say explicitly what any athlete's vaccination status is, but it's like acknowledging that challenges around visas might be influenced by, so you can kind of infer from that. Now I should probably read it verbatim, but
yeah,
they haven't come out and been like,
second part to that question then. So
okay,
and this is where the stats come in.
They can't ask that question.
Yeah,
no, they can't.
Yeah,
they did it
legally. They can.
No, okay, but then this is where this is the interesting thing about the stats. Will it be obvious which people have taken a vaccine and which people haven't taken a vaccine?
No.
That's a question. That's not.
It is impliable.
That's not a conspiracy. Like,
right.
This is not like
because if you get sent to the Atlas Games, you're more than likely someone who doesn't have a vaccine, or does have your vaccine. But also, a lot of the backfill athletes are getting pushed to the Atlas Games because it's the only one left. It's the only one left with spots. And so some of these guys might just get – I don't think they have enough time to get the vaccine. So –
well, here's where the stats become interesting, or to borrow from Tom, dangerous, because I was listening to the Savan podcast this morning with Brian Friend on that, and they were talking about this issue. And I cannot remember the athlete they had on now, but reading off that statement that Tom just mentioned about like travel and location, and so basically the guy they had, I think he finished 40th. I really cannot remember who it was now, and he's being sent to Atlas Games from Texas, right?
Yes.
And 3 other athletes have been given positions in semifinals that are closer. I think in 2 of the semifinals that would be geographically closer for him, who also had worse finishes than him. So that's where the stats come in. You can look at the stats and go, well, hold on, why is this person being sent here when he's done better? So if it's based on your performance and you get, to pick based on your performance, he should get to go to those ones. If it's based on geography, he's traveling further than anyone else. And he isn't vaccinated, and said that like this is a big issue for him, that he doesn't know if he'll be able to go there because he's not vaccinated. That's not an option that he wants to take. But as you've said, all the other semifinals are now full.
So this, everybody has their violent opinions on this, and they immediately start spouting stuff. And this is such a multi-level issue. People have a hard time not breaking things down into pieces, right? So number one, people aren't going to like this, but you could have bypassed this whole situation by just moving to the Atlas Games into the United States. They can also do it virtually, but we all agree that that's a bad move. So move it somewhere else. And you had enough time. You had more than enough time to solve this problem. I mean, hell, you're telling me the guys from the Syndicate and the MAC wouldn't also run this one? Because I bet they would. And the poor Atlas Games, I mean, I feel for these guys because they've really had a hard go at it. CrossFit should throw them some sort of bone. It needs to be somewhere in the United States. Put it in Texas. There's not one in the Southeast or Southwest. For 1 year, do something like that. But then number 2, and this isn't going to gain me any friends at CrossFit, and
welcome to Plate Stack Chat.
Right. Welcome to commentary in this CrossFit's realm in any capacity. But so one of the things that I did before semifinals was rank everyone and in North America and in Europe, because those are the only ones with multiple events. and basically snake draft everyone down the semifinals list. And yeah, that it's a little bit it takes CrossFit out of the equation. They can't make the decisions anymore. It's like, okay, you ask the top 4 guys and top 4 girls, where do you all want to go? Okay, we'll put you there. And then everybody else is filled in accordingly. Now everybody can't come back and be like, well, I can't go here. Well, I can't do this. Well, I can't do that. It doesn't matter. That's not how we do it. You don't get a say anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now CrossFit's putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and everybody is hating on CrossFit because they put themselves at the center of this at this decision, and they didn't have to do that, and now you have to, reap what you sowed on this. And I'm sorry, but now this is a big problem you created.
What if like somewhere like North America that has so many semifinals was forced into a more regionals-esque format that your location just determined, like it limited how many people could go from, because the States is a big place. So could you divide that back into like a region and say, okay, if you're in, even if you just cut it in half, you're like, this half get this many spots and this half get this many spots, and these are the semifinals that they get sent to. And maybe that would limit the field in a certain way, but no more so than Australia or Asia or anyone else is being kind of
split down the middle.
If you had like all of your top athletes coming kind of from the same state, you'd feel that was like, well, hold on a second, that's not,
right.
That doesn't make sense if you're then saying, and in all of Asia you can have this many, and then you can have that many from one state, kind of thing. So could there be a forced separation? Like, could you divide North America up into a more even split, considering they get more spots than anybody else?
Well, I wrote this point down, and I think Sam, you were making this point, but regionals versus semifinals, everybody wanted to compare, across the board, the athletes from here, the athletes from there. No, it was Jason, you made this point. But anyway, I think we're at a point now where we're going to go way off the rails here. And this goes back to my team, the things I was saying about teams in the comments last week. So we are genuinely concerned with the structure of how this works. And I think I get what Glassman was trying to do when he gave everybody a sanctional. He made the sanctional season, and you go to this, golf-esque tournament style, and you earn yourself that way, because then it's out of the control of CrossFit. They're not the people who you can blame anymore. And then, capitalism happens, and all these places, they find the best way to fund themselves. They find the best way to fund athletes, and CrossFit can take its hands off of it, right? And so I keep coming back to, I don't know that, again, I'm going to lose all my friends at CrossFit because I have so many. I don't know that CrossFit should be in charge of it anymore. They can be in charge of the games, but maybe not everything leading up to it. So when you're asking, maybe we go to a semi, or we break it up into quarters. Well, hell, if we're going to blow the thing up, let's just blow it up.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'd like to change? My big change would be, I don't understand why teams have to be like associated with a specific box, and they all have to be there, and then that's based on where they go. So like Annie's team are all going to go to a European regional because that's where their team is located, despite the fact that if they were going as individuals, they wouldn't. And yet an individual has to go just by, chance of where they happened to be born. Even if they don't live in that country, they haven't lived in that country, maybe, 90% of their life, they haven't lived in that country, but that's their nationality and they're forced to go there. If CrossFit want to make money, because we all know that's what they want to do, every athlete has to be a member of an affiliate that is registered, and then you go to the one that is linked to wherever your affiliate is based. So as long as similar thing to the teams, you have to maybe have been associated with that affiliate for a certain amount of time, so you can't just kind of shoot off to somewhere in South America and get a week's membership to do the open. But like, you've got to kind of, that's your gym is that one, and then your semi-final, whatever, is based on where you live or where your life is, not where you happen to have been born. And even if you maybe have no association or affiliation with your country anymore, and yeah, and we're seeing that now more than ever, that travel restrictions and things are a nightmare for certain people that live, outside of their country.
They have done that in the past. So if you look at like athletes
2018.
like Katrin David's daughter, she competed in probably like
17.
the Atlantic region because she was based in Boston, right? So but then when they introduced national champs, obviously we brought nationality back, and then I don't know whether they were worried about like people doing what you've just described, Jason, of like kind of relocating to somewhere where they thought they might have a more a better chance of kind of qualifying. But we had the sanctionals circuit as well, right? After alongside national champs. So, but
Right.
I think like Tyler, going back to what you were saying, and you were like, oh, this isn't going to get me any friends at CrossFit, but I can't remember where I mentioned it. I might have just jumped on a Instagram story or something like around like workout 3 of the individual quarterfinals, and everyone was getting up in uproar. And I think one of the things comes down to, and Jason, you said this about CrossFit making money and things like that, is like they are first and foremost a brand, right? They have like a brand narrative to weave, and they're not like a sporting governing body. And I think if they kind of like were to delegate some kind of administrative power to like a European office or a national office, that could be, they can still set the programming and they can still set expectations at the HQ level, but they kind of like delegate kind of like administrative powers to kind of like regional competition offices, then they could make sure that everyone feels like they're getting treated fairly, rather than worrying that athlete A isn't getting it's perceived that athlete A isn't getting the same treatment as athlete B because they don't have the same presence within the brand, right? And that's what people, I think, can start to get kind of uppity about. And we don't know like the backstory. There's many levels to it, right? But that could be seen, right? Is that who do you email, right?
Sam's bacon over here.
Yeah, this has got me. For some reason, weirdly, I don't really get cheesed off about much, right? But this, like, it's just confused / wound me up, because the sanctional season, right? So say first of all, they should just Tia's
Wound up.
Tia's competing. I imagine Tia's competing in the Oceania one, yeah.
Yeah, Torian Pro. Yeah.
So they might as well just add another space there. So they should have 6 that qualify from there, right, instead of 5. Because
if you win the games, you should just automatically get an invitation to the next year's games. I don't understand why you don't. Because anyone who wins and doesn't beat the champ, it doesn't really count. So let's just scratch that one off straight away.
So wherever Tia goes, and the sanctionals model didn't work, because there were some sanctionals giving prize money of, for example, the Dubai Championships was like 300,000, and the Sid must have been like $5,000 or something. And that's not a dig at Sid, and that's not a dig at the Dubai Championships. If you've got the money, why not? You want the best people to come. They're all going to fight out for the best thing. And the Dubai one was before the rest of them, I think. So if you won that, you punch the tickets at the games anyway, and you could just go clear up all of the other ones just for change. Like, do you know what I mean? And then not even need to take the position of that or whatever. National champions, I think, was a great idea, because it gives some identity to the competition. So you are the national champion of the place where you're from, and you get a ticket to the games because that's who you are. National champion of the Open, brilliant. It wouldn't necessarily work in the 3 workout Open that we just had, because it doesn't.
It's not enough.
You can't write stats for that, right?
It's just also a huge number of people. That's the problem.
It is a huge number of people, but I don't think that was a bad. It's just really hard to manage, right?
Right.
There are not. For example, the semi-finals, there won't be 30, 100. There won't be 30 lanes, for example, on the elite floor. There won't be. There'll be like 10, probably, maybe 12, 15, whatever. But there won't be enough to have all of the so at the games, they're not going to have 100 lanes again like they did in the first round of the of the 2019 games, wasn't it? It was 19. Yeah.
19. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not going to happen. I really like that, but I didn't like sanctionals. Semi-finals is really hard because, as you say, it kind of goes back to that the regionals sort of esque vibe, but again, kind of COVID sort of thrown a weird kind of
This wouldn't be an
vaccination.
issue if COVID hadn't screwed
No,
everything
well, because
up. Yeah.
just saying, going back to, so I've got the CrossFit Games rule book, and it says, where are we? Section 416, semi-finals COVID-19 policy. If for any reason an athlete is unable to travel to their respective semi-final competition, CrossFit will evaluate the circumstances and may grant the opportunity to compete in another semi-final event. Athletes with potential travel issues should contact the CrossFit Games immediately at support@crossfit.com, which is fine. It's in the rules. They are, that is the rule book. Mal O'Brien, for example, you don't know, but if she's not vaccinated, she's doing what it says in the rule book to do, and she is being allocated to a different semi-final. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely allowed, and that's fair. It might not seem fair. Kat, I was CrossFit coach Kat Scherer, who was she was raging about this on Instagram yesterday. Yeah, and she was saying, like, what if you've booked your ticket? Mal O'Brien said she was going to Atlas in Canada. You've booked your ticket, and now she's like, oh, by the way, I'm not going there. Well, I've already booked my hotel. I've already booked my flight. I've already booked this and that and the other. I can't just cancel those now. All I wanted to do was go see Mal O'Brien compete. How is that fair? Like, maybe it's the timing, and it's always the thing with me with CrossFit, managing expectation. They're just no good at managing expectation whatsoever.
One of the things that I don't understand is why they released the leader, the who was going where already. Why wouldn't you finalize that and then tell us? And I mean, this gets because a weird Instagram conspiracy theory, but it's like I feel like they want us to talk about it and bitch about it.
Yeah,
like Rick Hornsey was. I think you were watching when Rick Hornsey was talking about that, like leaking stuff. Basically, it's not a leak, but it's like an early release. Like, why are you early releasing this? Just finalize.
All you're doing is pissing everybody off. And
well, the problem is with the thing you read, Sam, and that, like, if someone's got a problem, they can move. Like, and this goes back to when we were talking with Rick actually about like events and how far in ahead you have to plan and how one moving part actually moves something. So if you've got 30 spots here, 20 spots here, 30 spots, whatever, if you move one person across, there aren't open spots. Someone else has to be moved, which behind the scenes, if nobody sees that, oh, actually I was going to go to the one next to my house and now I've got to go to the one 4 doors down, like, that's fine. You never knew. But if you saw your name, like, oh great, that's convenient, I just go next door, and then you see your name again and suddenly you've been moved, and you see because this person they've moved across, it's moved me. Like, there's too many moving parts. So, that idea of if you've got a problem, cool, great. And if everyone has a problem,
right.
But not everyone's going to have a problem, though, are they?
But it doesn't take everyone. It takes less. It takes probably a quarter of everyone, because then everything has to be shuffled. And then go ahead.
Go on. No, you go, because this is longer than a small thing. Go on.
Okay.
The reshuffle.
So Brian and I are we're going to have an article coming out on this in like the next 2 days, but essentially we shouldn't even have Atlas Games for the women now. The top 5 there aren't even in the same league as the girls who are going to miss in other semifinals in North America. Or we need to take 2 of their spots and give it to 2 other semifinals. So now, what if somebody, Mal moved out, but now I know that feels weak. Well, I want to move. I want to go to this one. Well, why do you want to move? Why the fuck does it matter? Everybody else gets to move.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with it. What they should do, and it kind of contradicts what I just said. So what they should do is play. No, but what they should do is
he's arguing with himself.
Yeah, I am always. I love it. And then I'll come out, and then I'll just sit on the fence again. Like, this is what we always do. We argue about everything and solve nothing.
Right.
But the idea that releasing it early, or at least telling people where they're going to compete first, and then taking the appeals or whatever, that I need to move because I'm not vaccinated. I can't. Maybe I've committed a crime in Canada and I'm not allowed into the country. Do you know what I mean? Like, whatever the reason is, you take those on board. because and there will be some dropout from that, which is where we've seen the extra spaces. So then, it drops down. At that point, people should roughly be where they're going to be anyway. Then you start opening up the places to then fill it up, which I think is what's happening. But at that point, like, you haven't got people going, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. The other option is, if you can't do something, you get a last chance qualifier spot.
I think so. Brian pointed out they have like an amendment now that says that, which I think is super sneaky.
Yeah, and that's not a solution. That's a really bad. That's a really bad solution that they've snuck in, and it's like, unknown and unknowable. No, what you can do is you can establish another online competition that's going to be more on par with a semi-final and keep the last chance. But the last chance and a semi-final, despite being in the same kind of groupings for how they progress people forward, are two very different things. And so putting everyone, and I think Brian mentioned this when he was highlighting that point. If it's like, if you think of the people that are going to the last chance, they are the people that just missed out at their, and we've just mentioned that there are some competitions where, some semi-finals where actually the top 10 would be the top 5 of 2 others, and they're not, and they've all gone to the same one. So 6 and 7 are who you're going to be facing off with at the last chance. Whereas if you'd gone to the same event as them, maybe they'd have taken first and second, and you could have got third.
Well, that's what you could do. So say you were somebody, you were like, I'm probably not going to qualify. So now I can just make a big stink. I think most guys wouldn't do this because they're stand-up guys anyway, but you could just make a big stink, and then until they're like, fine, you're just going to go to the LCQ. And then it's like, okay, if you just play the numbers, then I would be, if they made this rule, then I would come out with a video saying, if you are X, Y, and Z guy, just bail out. Go to the LCQ because you're going to win. That's and that's why it's a bad solution.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh,
now,
I swear, it winds me up so much.
Somebody contact me and pay me $300, and I'll tell you
who's going to win. If you've got a chance. Yeah. Like, here's my fee to CrossFit, and then here's my fee to Tyler to find out. But what I want to just circle back to now is, does Sam still think stats are boring? Because he's getting very worked up.
I haven't heard any stats today.
This is all the whole Atlas Games thing with the stats.
No, this is just people arguing about where they're going.
All right, yeah. I'm gonna wrap us up, and I'm gonna wrap us up with some stats. I mean,
I want to carry on arguing.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely could, right? And it goes back, did they really just want people to start talking about this, creating content about it, right?
It'd be great if people started watching people talk about it as well. So if our views could go up a bit.
We have a Patreon. At least 3 for my Instagram.
Is that statistically? That's what happens.
Accurate, yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna tell you where we are with Lowlands and Sid, just being Europe centric as I am. But
is that on Chalk and Fitness?
It's where I look personally as well, right? I'm gonna go to.
That's where you would be made to compete somewhere.
Yeah. Just so here's some stats for you, Sam. Well, anyone listening, but Lowlands. I have Lowlands as having 8 female games athletes with 19 appearances between them. 4 of them have been to the games multiple times, and I've limited that to individual like kind of games appearances. So I don't include age group, I don't include teen and things like that. So interestingly, so that's Lowlands. Sid has 7 female games athletes with 30 appearances between them. 16 of them, I think, come from Katrin and Sam Briggs alone. So, that's a stats, and I think is kind of, gives you an idea of like the kind of like
if we're going like
experience.
That's 3 individual winners, right?
So yeah,
Kat's won twice and Sam's won once, right?
Yeah.
Stats.
So there you go.
Before you jump to the guys, Sam counted Sam Briggs out. He said she's not going to make it to the games. That's what she said, right?
When? Last week?
No, just now. Earlier, you said Sam's not going to make it to the games. She's basically
I was saying that whether she did make it, because I knew there were 7 spare spaces and she came 67th.
Oh, okay,
Right?
okay.
So that was I didn't know how that would filter in, whether she would make it or not in the amount of spaces that were left.
Right.
But
So
why not?
I
Let's
have
throw it out
her-
there. Yeah, probably Sam has said that. I believe that he would have said that. So yeah, we'll
Sounds like
start the
something Sam
rumor.
would
We'll
say.
start the rumor.
Yeah. I actually really
think
like
she's
Sam
in
Briggs.
second in my rankings right now. She's in second. She'll come out second at the end of the weekend.
Nice.
Jacqueline Dahlstrom in third, and Emma McQuaid winning that thing.
Yeah, 100. I would. What have I got here? I will put this hairbrush.
Oh,
Okay,
damn.
that Emma McQuaid wins a semi-final.
Yeah, get the feeling that Sam can afford to lose a hairbrush. That's probably not a big problem.
This is actually my beard.
This is a bad
brush.
bet. Never mind.
Do you know how nappy this beard gets? Like,
What
it's
about
the
the
only
men?
thing around? If Rubik's Cube, if Emma McQuaid doesn't win, I will give one of our listeners / watchers this Rubik's Cube, this exact one, and it's like a weirdly shaped one too. So it's like, if you're on Spotify, I'll post it on Instagram for you.
What about the men?
Well, one of the things I'm just going to say, you were saying in your with regards to Sam Briggs, right? And so one of the stats things I've done, because I'm kind of getting into these dark holes occasionally, is if you take quarterfinal results and then re-rank them based solely on those within that within that semi-final, how does it change the ranking order?
Yeah.
Now, what you'll and really what that does is it reduces the impact of a poor result in quarterfinals, because you haven't got 1,000 or hundreds of other athletes to stack between you. And so someone like Sam, who had 1 or 2 poor results, which pulled her down to 67th, suddenly, and so when I've rescored the quarterfinals only for SID female athletes, then she jumps up to kind of like I think I've got her at like 20th or something. So she immediately jumps up. Now, your stats will kind of go even further looking at kind of her performance. You've got to recognize the experience she has on a live competition floor, right? We're not just talking
The more extreme
quarterfinals.
events too. Yeah.
She's a lung, mate. Like, let's be honest.
So
So
what?
She is a lung. She is a lung.
Oh, brilliant. So there's just those examples
It's an
where like
interesting way
someone
of
who's
doing
like,
it. Yeah.
because poor results mean less
With a
once
smaller
you kind of
field.
get to a smaller field.
Mhm.
And I tried to explain that when people were like, oh, why am I ranked differently in the worldwide quarterfinal to the kind of European quarterfinal? It's like, oh, it's because it's whether it's split and then scored or scored and then split.
Right.
But anyway, that's people it's getting to bedtime, and I might be putting people to sleep. To give you the men's on SID and Lowlands, so 7 games athletes at strength and depth with 14 appearances between them, and then I've got Lowlands as 9 game athletes with 20 appearances between them. So plenty of experience across both divisions and both events.
Lowlands is the one thing that's made me sad over all of this stuff, because BKG is going to Lowlands, and
And
I
really wanted him at SID.
wanted him at SID.
Could you reckon? Why don't you get him to email support@crossfitgames? In fact, why don't you just email support@crossfitgames.com and just express your your disappointment that BKG's not going to be there, and then they might just send him there.
Tom, you're going to Lowlands potentially.
Yeah.
Could you take out a restraining order against BKG so that he can't be in the same building as you?
Rig it.
That is
that's a genius idea.
That's some effort, isn't it? Really, so some
Who-
effort.
This might interest you all. Nikita Yudnov?
Yeah.
In my rankings is going to get 3rd.
Mm.
And I don't know much. I'm bad on Europe. BKG and Yona, Lazar. I'm good on those guys, but this Nikita guy is new to me.
Who's that? Sorry. Oh yeah,
Nikita-
Nikita Yundov.
Yundov.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. 37th in the quarterfinals from. So yeah.
Dark
Oh,
horse
he
pick.
has a 98% soul rating, so he's
Soul,
going
yeah,
to do.
huge soul. Soul
Mate,
man,
I don't
they call him.
What's his name?
Nikita Yundov. 37th in quarterfinals.
What I'm intrigued, and then I will wrap it up. Like, what's
Sorry,
bringing
I
him
keep
to?
prolonging
No,
it.
no, what? No. I'm intrigued, but what in your stats is bringing him? Because I'm looking there, and
He's
like I'm
Russian.
only looking at quarterfinals, right? So, like,
Let me see.
what's really kind of highlighting?
He's not going to
him
get to
you?
America anyway. Like, this is irrelevant.
No,
He
he's
won't get a
he's
visa.
going to Lowlands. Oh,
Yeah,
I
but
see-
he
I
won't
see
get to
what
the
you're saying.
games.
Yeah.
If
Let
he's
me-
if he's Russian, how come he's going to Lowlands?
I don't know, but he is in.
Well,
I
let me
updated these
rephrase
earlier.
that. He's not got a flag, so I make that assumption.
Dual citizenship.
He
Maybe.
is. So he, in previous years, he's become first in Belarus.
Oh, he's Belarusian.
Yeah. He went to the games in 2019, came 101st.
It's the Belarusian national champion.
He came 17th in the CrossFit Lowlands Throwdown semi-final last year as well. So
Let's see.
If he doesn't have a flag on the thing, is that because someone at CrossFit just read US at the end of Belarus and were like, oh, he must be Russian, and
No,
they
he's
just haven't
probably-
bothered
he's-
to look up
he's-
the geography of the world, and they
he's
just
probably
decided to
Russian.
remove his flag.
He probably has a Russian flag, or I don't know. Are there any other Belarusians?
Belarusians.
That is what someone from Belarus is, isn't it?
Okay, so what's
Belarusian.
pulling him up is 2021. He was in the Lowlands Throwdown. He got a second and a third,
okay.
and then I suspect some other stuff happened this year that pulled him up as well. But yeah, that's preliminary right there. Interesting. Just be on the lookout. Maybe it's totally wrong. Like I said, heart rating,
Yeah.
Right.
soul
Maybe-
rate, soul
Yeah.
rate.
Oh, he will get. He was at Wadapalooza, so he will. Well, he should.
Yeah.
He should get a visa. You'd imagine. So
And he came 31st in Europe last year, 119th in the world in the Open last year as well. So like there's some kind of consistency there as well, right? So it's you know, at least then, right? 1,000th worldwide, even top 1,000 even back in 2018. So you know he's 384th in 2019. You know that's interesting. I finally found a way to pull all the results for all the kind of the top. I think I did the top 100 athletes in Europe and managed to pull all the results into one spreadsheet. But
That's good.
It's a mess right now. But
It's
just
there.
managed to do that there.
Ionis Papadopoulos, second.
There we go.
Second at the SID.
you reckon? I could probably rig that.
Well, there's his two event. I mentioned this earlier, right? His two event wins, right? He's and especially with that, like, great, you know, for something like a live event, right? You know, the event 5 with the kind of what was that, the snatches and the burpee box jump and the rowing, right? The ability just to kind of like go ham and get an event win will be really powerful. I guess one thing we'll have to see, because I know I've been talking about how like lower scores. Poorer results hurt you less in a smaller field, but it all depends on what scoring system they use, right? If they use kind of like placing equals points, or whether they'll go for 100 and go down the other way. So
Right.
or Z scoring.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks,
and it
guys.
depends.
Go
It
ahead.
Yeah, it's
depends.
been an absolute-
It depends how many events there are too, right?
Yeah.
That's a
The
different story.
longer, it's probably going to hurt him worse.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's been great chatting. I've enjoyed it. So Tyler, thanks very much for joining us. As I mentioned it right at the beginning, you can follow Tyler at Texess, TEXXESS. But do keep an eye out for all his content. He's regularly writes for Barbend, but he's also putting out some really interesting stuff with Brian on Morning Shore Cup as well. So excited to kind of see your additions to the game season going forward.
You guys too. You all put out some great stuff. Keep kicking it. I know we don't
will.
give Europe as much as much attention, but I think that'll grow fast.
We'll keep at it. So yeah, and then Jason's at Jason CF Media and Sam is at LaRoche Original, and I am, well, you know where I am because it's plugged throughout the episode. Right. With that said, let's leave it there, and we'll catch you guys next week.
See you.
Ciao, bye.